think, is the youngest person I interviewed for the Money Revealed series. And I have to admit that I went there and I'm wondering, okay, this kid's still in college. He's got like so much less experience seemingly than all these other people we talked about when it came to cryptocurrency and blockchain. But my partner and co-founder of Revealed Films, Jeff Hayes, said, we gotta go interview this kid. So I showed up. And let me tell you, I was literally blown away. This kid gave me an understanding and a vision of the implications of blockchain and cryptocurrency like nothing else I had ever heard. So lean into this interview. You want to understand cryptocurrency? You want to understand blockchain? Listen to this interview. Jordan, thanks for spending some time today. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. It's great to be here.
So this is very interesting to me. You are a freshman at Georgetown, or actually a rising sophomore at this point.
Yes.
And you are deep into this whole cryptocurrency thing.
Yeah, I've fallen a bit down the rabbit hole for sure.
So how did you even get started with this? What got you interested?
So I actually found out about cryptocurrency kind of a long time ago, but I've only kind of recently spent more time getting deeper into it. This past summer especially, I kind of had a little bit of extra time on my hands after getting into college, and I started thinking about what I wanted to do with my summer. And I'd always wanted to read more about cryptocurrencies, so I kind of spent my entire summer dedicated it to really learning everything I could, going to a couple different conferences. I actually drove out for the State of Digital Currency in LA, which was kind of super inspirational. I remember hearing Brock Pierce speak, and I was just kind of blown away.
What's your major in school?
So I'm currently undecided.
Okay.
I'm in the Abdalla School of Business, so there's only kind of a few tracks I can go. I'm thinking about probably finance, and maybe marketing or psychology, kind of as a minor.
So with all your interest in crypto and as deeply involved as you're getting, you think you're going to finish school?
I think that's kind of the real question. It's a question I've run into kind of a couple times already. First, kind of after the first semester, I actually, kind of sat down with my dean and my parents and had a conversation about, I think it's kind of, potential reality, having to think about, taking time or transferring, things like that. But I for now, I'm very committed to school. I think I've kind of figured out a good way to kind of let the two coalesce and work together.
What excited you about cryptocurrency? I mean, why this sudden drive to go to conferences, learn about this? What do you see?
So I think kind of as a little bit of background, I was a very, very, very into public forum debate in high school. Kind of the captain of the debate team, and so I have a strong passion to kind of understand things that I don't quite understand at first. So that's kind of how it started. It just kind of started with doing research for fun and to kind of understand and get a grip of all of it. And then also my family is kind of a very finance-oriented family. My parents met on Wall Street, so kind of once I got a little bit deeper into it, I started to understand this is really something that's revolutionary. It's not just some fad, basically.
Well, so you think it's revolutionary. What are the views of your parents? Do they share your opinions about this, or do they think you're chasing something that's a fantasy?
So I think my dad's very much on the same page as me. We've kind of spent, and my brother to some extent too, although he's more interested in kind of the gambling aspects of Bitcoin.
So he's speculating around.
Yeah,
it.
so
Okay.
he's more interested in kind of online gambling with it and that kind of stuff. But my parents are both kind of very supportive. Both of me and of the space, I think.
So do you feel like this is a fad? This is something that is going to have some staying power and is going to evolve? How do you see this all emerging?
So that's a good question. I think just kind of from my perspective, I think once kind of a revolutionary idea is out there in the capital market, there's not much you can do about it. I think the more you see opportunities for variation, for people kind of contributing and putting things forward in the space, kind of inventing and revolutionizing all the time, that's the kind of space that crypto is very conducive to, because everything is open source. And there's a very, very strong brain drain toward the space, kind of from traditional finance, from entrepreneurs. You kind of see a bunch of these people moving toward the space. And one of the things that is really interesting about crypto is there's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy type model going on, where Not only is it extremely exciting technology, not only are we seeing really, really exciting early markets, but also it's so exciting that it's bringing, a good majority of the smart, the smartest people in coding and in finance that are coming up, that are kind of very much focused on kind of the space. People more in my generation and kind of the generations around me are very, very much, understanding that this is kind of the future. So I think it has to do with the fact that, people that are growing up now are less used to a traditional banking model. And so you have a huge opportunity to kind of revolutionize what people think of as customary.
Is there a spiritual side of this revolution for you? I mean, do you see that it's going to have some impact on the world, other than the fact that this is a business opportunity or a wealth opportunity, that maybe it's going to have some impact in the world that you want to see happen?
So I think the answer is yes. I think personally for me, I kind of try and detach my emotions from crypto when I'm investing and doing value propositions and that kind of stuff. But from a more philosophical point of perspective, I think crypto has the chance to liberate people and to give people access to services that they have been fundamentally robbed of, since the beginning of time, basically. And I think, even more important than that is it's not necessarily going to be revolutionary, in that if certain actors push the market in a certain way or do certain things, there is a chance that it could end up being, just a greater wealth divide. Which would be really unfortunate.
So what you're saying is, it seems that there are people involved who are trying to manipulate the markets, through what their actions as compared to creating, the vision of what this thing was meant to be.
Right. I think there are some bad actors in the space which are, slowly being weeded out. Increased SEC regulation, increased regulation ICOs, lockups, and things like that are really helping to kind of get bad actors out of the space. But the danger with having the DLT, or distributed ledger technology, attached and ingrained so deeply with Bitcoin is that, any kind of scandal that goes on with Bitcoin affects the reputation of, the entire ecosystem in reality, which is, not great right now.
And it's not all just Bitcoin, right? I mean,
right.
Bitcoin's just one of many
Yeah,
coins that are out there in the marketplace. Happens to be the biggest.
Right.
and probably the most well known from a brand standpoint.
For sure, yeah.
So how would bad actors act? In other words, we say these bad actors, what are they actually doing?
So I think it would be, kind of things like, hacks, especially one of the biggest barriers of entry right now. And one of the reasons that the market is still so niche is the fact that it's very difficult to safeguard your private keys in a way for the everyday person, in a way that is, convenient and also, secure. So until that kind of gets figured out, and I think, the custodian services and kind of the infrastructure that needs to be built out is really happening now. And I think that's why you kind of hear people say the crypto market now is similar to early internet, just because, the infrastructure to allow the market to really flourish is not actually there yet.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because back when Bitcoin was maybe at 300, yeah, you're laughing. So I was talking to some friends of mine who had acquired some, and they're very tech-oriented guys, and somebody who built and ran a technology company, so I had some background,
right.
and I wasn't tech-phobic, so to speak, but I loved what it represented as far as a non-government controlled currency and what it could do in the world. I saw it pretty quickly that this could be really cool. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go and just buy a chunk. Number one, I just want to support it. Number two, I think it might go somewhere. And I remember going in, and it was so difficult for me to try to navigate the acquisition of Bitcoin that I'm sort of saying, if I'm someone who's kind of somewhat tech-oriented, and to me, I'm having a difficult time figuring out, okay, well, how do you get it? How do you secure it? How do you put it in a wallet? What do you do with it? It's got to be so complicated. And in my busy CEO life, it was like, if I'm having this much problem, I can't imagine a bunch of other people are going to do this. So I think what you're saying is that the infrastructure now is being built out to make that much more efficient. Yeah.
So I think if you look at kind of the early market solutions, problems like custodianship and all those things. You have, Trezor, you have Ledger. You've got kind of a bunch of what are cold storage wallets that are pretty effective, but you can't. Someone like Goldman Sachs isn't going to be holding a Trezor. Like that doesn't quite track. So you've kind of been hearing people say that institutional money is headed into the space since late 2017. People have been really, really focused on that, and I think what you see is that is still probably at least a year away.
Right.
And I think people kind of want to jump the gun on that. But kind of the more know your customer paperwork and all that stuff gets kind of more digitally logged, kind of hopefully on the blockchain, it'll be kind of more seamless to onboard people onto things like Coinbase. And again, also I think part of it has to do with public perception, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that these websites can crash if you have too much spike in daily users is pretty ridiculous. I mean, it's like something like E-Trade would never crash if the market was somewhat volatile. So you have to have things like that kind of get hammered out before you can really expect any type of mainstream adoption.
So I know this would be a speculative answer on your part, but do you believe that there'll be a surge again of value in cryptocurrency once this infrastructure starts to make it more consumer friendly?
I mean, generally the answer is yes. I think, if for me, Bitcoin is a store of value. Now, a store of value has to be, it can't be this volatile. So I guess right now it's more of a theoretical store of value, and I guess we'll see kind of if it can hedge against the markets in the next few years, and we'll see, kind of how the utility of that evolves. But if it is a store of value, and that is a fairly big if. But if it is a store of value, and I think part of what store of value means is that it has the momentum of human history on its side. If Bitcoin is digital gold, which is kind of the moniker that everyone seems to give it, that would make it a store of value utility, or a store of value, which is not really possible when it's this volatile. So we'll kind of see how that unfolds the next few years. But if it is a store of value, and if it is the next generation of store of value, then the nominal price of a single Bitcoin is theoretically infinite, right? Because if it's a store of value, then that means there's no real upside in kind of no upside cap in how high the price can go. Now, cryptocurrency in general, I think the market will swing back in a big way. Bitcoin is more of a question mark, just because people are still wondering. There's still questions about velocity. The proof of work system is not the most eco-friendly and might not be the one that has the most success long term, but from what the market looks like right now, I would say that it's Bitcoin at 7,000 is a pretty good bet. Yeah.
So now, interesting, because you keep referring to Bitcoin, but there are hundreds, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
Cryptocurrencies
thousands,
out there.
Yeah.
And thousands. Okay. So they're not all. Most of them are going to have to wash out, and there's going to be, I guess, a few that are left. Is that the way that most people feel about it?
Yeah. So I think kind of what you're going to see is people like to refer to the market as the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very accurate representation, I think. You might see 80% of these projects go to nothing, and obviously that's something that's been kind of happening in the space over the last few years. I mean, if you look at kind of the top 10 coins from 2012, you won't see most of those names.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean, like, you look at some of the first ICOs, the first kind of big coins. Like you look at things like Namecoin, Filecoin. Those aren't as big anymore. And so there is kind of some the utility coins that don't have a clear utility, or that have kind of any SEC gray area clarity will be shut down most likely. And so the interesting thing you have to think about with the SEC is they kind of talk about the level of decentralization a project can have. And this is kind of the idea that the issuer of a token could issue a security because it might be overly centralized kind of in the beginning duration. So this is what lockups are oftentimes trying to prevent, is that if the utility function is going by the time the lockup ends, then it's not really a speculative investment, right? It's a consumptive use case. So a lot of tokens that are kind of have tried to go down this utility token ERC20 path. One, they depend on the Ethereum network kind of figuring out how to scale pretty quickly, which is still kind of an if. And so yeah, a lot of these projects could kind of be wiped out, and there is still incredibly risky space, but there's a lot of
promise. In the end, this only has value if people are going to start using it, right? I mean, so how important is the role of vendors starting to accept cryptocurrencies as payment? I know that I think Overstock.com was for the first one to say, hey, you can pay us in Bitcoin. I think Tesla, you can buy Tesla in Bitcoin now. So it's starting to creep out there a little bit. But how much of the bet on this is dependent upon the fact that people will trade goods and services?
So I think it's actually a smaller part of the bet than people think. So, I'd say most cryptocurrencies are not necessarily transactional coins. They're meant to give people an ability to create and build applications and decentralized applications that kind of add a level of functionality above currency. And so kind of as people understand what the use cases and what the limits of them are, that's kind of what's going to drive adoption, as opposed to using Bitcoin instead of a credit card at a store. I mean, that's not that game changing, right? That's just, instead of credit, which is already kind of an abstract value, Bitcoin is a similar thing. And it's better because it's more subdivisible and it's fungible. Might not be quicker now, but I'd say that transactional coin isn't necessarily what the game is. The kind of limits on what we'll be able to do with currency, it's hard to kind of explain them, partially because we have no real conception for what this might look like. So if you look at like people thinking about what the internet might look like, you can't really kind of predict how it's going to look in a couple of years, because of it opens up markets that we've never even seen before. And so that's kind of what, the level of smart contracts and kind of that functionality of crypto is something that's pretty, game changing. We haven't even seen anything like it before. So we have to kind of wait and kind of see what the real driver of adoption is. But I think it's going to be that one, killer dApp, as like people like to say, one application that really onboards people well, and that'll work. And I also think that it kind of runs in cycles of liquidity. So if you kind of stack a bunch of good news, cryptocurrency news in a couple weeks, and the price starts to build a couple good days, then you kind of have the hype machine start going, and you have liquidity cycles where the price is going to skyrocket and triple and do all these different things. And then once it kind of reaches the limits of what the infrastructure can hold, then it'll create a crypto winter. And that cycle kind of happens over and over again until the architecture gets built out, in which case I think we kind of stay in that market.
So this is interesting because you're referring to it as crypto, but some of these applications are blockchain, not necessarily currency based, as far as the crypto itself. So how do you separate those two things in your mind?
So when I say crypto, I kind of mean a crypto asset more generally. So a blockchain token, or a token that corresponds to a blockchain, the vast majority of them are essentially utility tokens. Or what
do you mean by utility token?
So a utility token is essentially a token whose value and price should come from access to the network or functionality on the network, the blockchain.
Right.
As opposed to a security token, which is just a tokenized security. So, if I buy a token that gives me access to a REIT portfolio or something like that, that's, essentially just a security, just with wider liquidity base. So I think, security tokens.
So security token, you're saying, is backed by some asset. It's not just the thing that's inherent. That's digital gold.
Yeah.
It's saying you referred to a real estate investment trust saying, hey, this currency or this cryptocurrency is backed by actual assets in a place,
right?
And basically the value of those assets will reflect the value of this currency.
So they kind of have a couple gold mines are ICOing under a security token. So you get access to the underlying value of the gold, which I don't see as super groundbreaking. But security tokens do offer people that have never had access to markets really financial liquidity, because it's very easy to set up. A wallet, and it will get a lot easier too. So that's kind of what people don't understand, is that things that are extremely hard to do in niche markets become less hard as they're more traditional markets.
What I see, and tell me if you think I'm right or wrong in this, is that in third world countries, especially like say Sub-Saharan Africa,
right.
And all these countries where you've got very fragile or corrupt governments, that have their own currency, but the currency of that country is something that is very kindly undependable. So now, basically, if you're an entrepreneur in that country and you'd say, geez, I'd like to be able to trade in something other than my country's currency, because I could work for 15 years, I could build some wealth, and next thing you know, it could be squandered, something completely independent of me. So it brings, I think, the world to the marketplace where government-controlled currencies can't. Does that seem like an accurate aspect of this?
Yeah. So I think we're kind of seeing the world move to a more borderless global, marketplace and network. But the place where that really doesn't exist is third world countries. I think, people kind of forget that a lot of the technology that's going on there is either stuck far behind or has leapfrogged. So kind of with the example of telephones, they kind of skipped landlines and went entirely to kind of handheld. So the analogous situation would be that there is no banking infrastructure in the vast majority of the third world, and so that's one of the biggest issues, and I think that's a pain point that crypto projects are really going after. There's a lot of decentralized banks and banking applications that are going to basically attempt to give financial services to those kind of populations, and those are also really exciting projects. But I also think that you see a premium being placed on the price of cryptocurrencies in markets where the government is not responsible actors or not reliable actors. So I think in Zimbabwe at one point the price of one Bitcoin was like above 11,000, which was like a $4,000 premium above the price of Bitcoin, because like you said, there's such a need to have a reliable borderless source of.
But how so you're saying that they would, if you're in Zimbabwe, which is one of those countries that has currency issues and has a history of them, you're saying that they would have to pay much more for a Bitcoin than somebody in the United States? I thought
So basically the way it works is if I want to buy Bitcoin, there's a couple of things I can do. I can buy it off of a friend or a person I know in person, which would not require an exchange, would not require any of those things. It's kind of more like the kind of a Craigslist equivalent of such kind of, I'll give you my Bitcoins, you give me whatever. And the other thing you can do is you can go on an exchange, something like Shapeshift or Changely, which is websites that basically do you don't have to create a KYC profile for those. But the difference is that some of the exchanges and some of the places you can only access from certain VPNs or certain geolocations. So there's some fencing and barriers kind of along the getting access to exchanges. And so that's very hard to do.
But if I'm in Zimbabwe and I have an internet connection,
yeah,
I can't just set up a...
So you can set up a node. You can mine. You can do a lot of things to acquire Bitcoin, but there are also situations where you just want to be trading from local currency, local fiat to Bitcoin, and that exchange rate is going to be
I see what's happening because
because more people are willing to pay a higher percentage for. It's basically a representation of distrust in the government. So it's exactly what you're saying. I think, and I'm not sure Zimbabwe is even the exact country, but yeah. So your point is very accurate. Like there are too many borders. One, and so to have like a full global market, you pretty much have to have a system that kind of matches up with that, which fiat really doesn't.
So it's very interesting to me because I look at what it would mean to the world to unleash all these entrepreneurs who just have no path. I mean, there is such a thing as people who don't have any opportunity because of the barriers that are in front of them. And being able to say that we're going to remove these barriers and bring this many more people to a marketplace that can contribute to it, I think it is almost unfathomable about what might happen, like you say about the internet. Like we can't even know what that means. It's an unprecedented thing.
And I think along with that goes the fact that not only the people that are going to be using this is kind of anyone, but if you look at kind of the revolution we've had in fundraising, in access to projects, and access to doing ICOs, I mean, that is, in my opinion, also very revolutionary. I mean, if you think about the fact that as opposed to having to give away a good amount of equity, having to basically cave into the demands of whatever VC you decide to go with on your series, and then at the same point they you'll get very small increments of money. I mean, there's a lot of downsides, and it's very difficult to raise money the traditional way. And then you look at the crowdfunding model, which ICOs have raised. I don't even know what the number is, but it's an incredible amount of money in the last 3 years alone. And there's kind of more technology being built out around it. There's a couple ICOs which are actually planning on kind of doing a hybrid model between the two, where you have a smart contract that'll kind of release money over time as opposed to just kind of giving some money. But the entire space is kind of designed around an open source network where pretty much anyone has access to funds, has access to coding. I mean, people can build projects in their basement, quite literally, which is why so many more revolutionary projects are coming from this. It's that you're empowering everyone to really anyone who can build on the protocols are doing it.
So interesting, because something just comes to mind as you're describing some of this. If I am a small government, especially if I'm a dictator of a government, I could probably set up all kinds of server farms to start mining Bitcoin and saying, hey, I'm gonna confiscate a bunch of wealth from my country, and I'm gonna get warehouses full of computers starting to mine Bitcoin. Is that going on at all?
Yeah, so the idea of centralization of the network through kind of collecting a high amount of computing power is a real issue, especially one in the Bitcoin community more so than the cryptocurrency community in general, just because that is kind of the most ideologically dividing topic, I think. But so kind of what you're seeing is a couple of countries for sure both profit off Bitcoin and also and also all cryptocurrencies, and also confiscate them quite frequently. From random, laundering or kind of whatever they find, they keep those Bitcoins. And so, some governments, some dictatorial governments have large stashes of Bitcoin, but really not enough to be substantial. And I think the vast majority of them have basically sold them off. So like the United States government, they have auctions for the Bitcoin. And in the very beginning, there was huge arbitrage on those, but eventually people started to realize that's what's going on, and the OTC over-the-counter desks started buying all the Bitcoin. So a lot of it will go back into circulation. Some of it won't. That's just kind of the name, part of the game. I think that one of the biggest issues with governments, and one of the ways this could get derailed, is that if you kind of have a partial revolution where currency just becomes a token that is statewide, something like what you see happen in Russia. They basically just made, or in Venezuela right now, basically with petrol. Those are essentially border confined tokens. I mean, they're not literally confined, but they are essentially backed by the government, created by the government. It's not really the same vision. It's
another government currency as compared to something that's
right.
In a
it's
free
not
market.
The people's currency,
right?
Basically.
And that's kind of the interesting thing. So what I'm very curious about, and I think you've stated it in some ways, but maybe we can dig a little deeper, is how does someone from your generation start to view this, and what's the feeling or the spirit of it compared to somebody from a much older generation like me, who said I grew up in a different way, pre-internet, all that stuff, watch the internet unfold, etc. But if somebody when I was your age said one day in your future there's going to be currency in the world that's not controlled by any government, and it's not controlled by banks, it's decentralized, there's no broker in the middle of every transaction, it would have been some sort of a science fiction thing, and here we are in it. So I'm looking back on it with but I have filters on because of how I grew up. You're basically born into this.
Right.
So when you are around your friends, your other classmates, and other people that are in your generation in this industry, what is the conversation like?
So the conversation's very interesting. I'd say that if not a good base understanding, I'd say the majority of people that I meet kind of around my age at least know about cryptocurrency, have some general idea of what it is, and have a lot of them have had experience interacting with it in the past. Maybe that's for things that aren't necessarily what it's going to be used for in the future, but
not that legal,
right? Might be fake IDs is probably the biggest way most people know about Bitcoin and that kind of stuff. So I get a lot of those messages.
This is interesting. So see, I'm learning something here. So you're saying things like and that's the whole point. What's somebody who's 19 years old interested in an ID that says I'm 21? How do you get that? Well, I got there's nefarious characters that will trade cryptocurrency.
So the thing about crypto and on the blockchain and all this stuff is that it's completely immutable. So something that I do on the blockchain, this is what I tell my friends, is some transaction you make, your private keys can be dehashed at some point, and it can be people can figure out who it was, if they have enough computing power and they have enough time on their hands. So any transaction that is nefarious on the blockchain, has a history that it will stay there forever. So it's not necessarily an issue of the whole connotation of illegality that's going on in the blockchain is not really true. I mean, the percentage of crimes that's kind of occurs through crypto is much, much smaller than cash or credit.
I'm sure. But now you're bringing up another issue, because this is kind of interesting, because basically transactions are in the ledger, everybody's got it, and it's a permanent record, right? As you said, I think you referred to it as immutable.
Yeah.
It's a permanent record,
Right.
I guess what are the privacy issues relative to the transactions you make with your cryptocurrency?
So if you follow some basic kind of trading behavior, it's very difficult to kind of find anything like that. And also, Bitcoin is a public ledger. It's an open source. Like you could see it, we could scan it, we could see the log. It's very different from something like Monero or Zcash. Kind of more grayscale technology that kind of hides your traces a lot better. And there are very, very much privacy centric coins. Bitcoin is not one of them. Bitcoin is very much a public ledger. So theoretically, if someone has your address, they have your private keys, they can, they have access to your Bitcoins. They can see how many Bitcoins you have. And they can do that by checking your wallet. I mean,
But you're not a name. You're basically a sequence of numbers.
But if one of the problems with metadata is that metadata is gonna get very, very good. So if you have someone who transacts in a certain place or a certain website, constantly, things like that, you just don't necessarily want to be involved in any nefarious transactions that are going to be held forever. Just because that doesn't, it's not a good setup.
Well, it's very interesting to consider. But there's other things that are maybe I don't know if I'd call them gray, but they're going to challenge the legal system.
Definitely.
Because as the borders come down, transactions can occur, and where a buyer is from a regulatory or legal standpoint, and where the seller is from similar standpoint, they might have different rules and different laws in place.
Right.
And now they're transacting, and is somebody selling something? Well, it's kind of legal for me to sell this to you, but you're not in a place where it's legal for you really to kind of purchase it. And so there's going to be, I think, some things that emerge that are going to really have to cause laws to be rewritten.
Yeah, so the exact dilemma you're talking about is one that is happening in the ICO market right now. So the SEC is harder to deal with than the countries like Malta.
Right.
So ICO projects you find them more and more going over to Asia for money, and the reason being that they have way less strict investor laws. And so, a lot of ICO projects, especially more recently, just will not allow U.S. customers to take part in the ICO because it's too much to deal with in the SEC, and if it gets determined to be a security, then there's just like a ton of kind of gray area you don't necessarily want to be playing around in. So a lot of the ICO projects don't accept U.S. customers
at all, even after they're launched.
No. Once they're launched after ICO, then you can trade them.
Now I get it. So and isn't that? And this is bringing to light, I think, a generalized understanding of how regulation oppresses capitalism and capitalist markets. Is saying that, like exactly what you're saying. Hey, I've got something I want to bring to a marketplace. How do you, and it's walking the line, like the SEC saying, well, we have to protect consumers,
right?
But at the same time, we don't want to constrict things so much that we stall the market because nobody can do anything. But if I'm doing an ICO, I'm not going the cost and the time and everything else to try to comply with the SEC. You're saying I can go to Malta and suddenly just launch one there, and once it is launched and established, then I could sell wherever I want.
Yeah, so there are a couple kind of interesting things going on here. First, you see a couple of different areas in the world trying to open themselves up as kind of blockchain havens. And an interesting one in the U.S. is Wyoming. So Wyoming kind of passed 5 bills more recently, or laws more recently, kind of in the last few months, that basically make it the most blockchain-friendly state in America.
Wow.
So there's I believe you don't have to have a money transmitter license if it's a utility token. I believe they changed some securities law around. You don't have to pay income tax. And so there's a lot of blockchain-friendly things kind of going on over there, which is really interesting. And also have, series LLCs, which means that you can, set up a Wyoming LLC from anywhere, basically, and kind of get taxed in that way. So there's a lot of really interesting ways people are going to get around it, and that people are going to adapt to it. But I think that, the U.S. government has not done a bad job in terms of crypto. I mean, people like to get on them a lot and give them, a hard time. But in reality, it would be scary, right, to have a currency that fundamentally inverts part of what your responsibility is as a government. They're understandably wary of the technology, kind of from where they're sitting as kind of arbiters of fiat. I mean, they're the ones who control all money right now, right? Basically,
well, and that's kind of begs my next question is saying, if I'm the United States government and I've got a United States Treasury, I've got a Federal
Right.
Reserve, and I got control of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now, should I not be very scared and nervous about cryptocurrency coming into the marketplace? Like I remember in the infant stages, I was getting very concerned that the government was going to step in at some point and say, we can't allow this. This is, now people are going to be able to trade
Right.
independent of our banking systems, our Federal Reserve, et cetera. We've got a $20 trillion debt, to consider, the tax implications. I mean, so why do you think the government is sort of like allowing this?
Well, I'd say that at this point, it's gone too far. I mean, in my opinion, there's no
The
way
genie's
to put
out
the
of the
genie out of the
bottle.
bottle. Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, I think at this point, there's nothing really they can do. I mean, so for example, for a fun thought experiment, if I want to shut down Bitcoin, how would I do that? I mean, I guess I go to the Bitcoin Foundation. I mean, they're not like even directly involved.
Yeah.
They could all just say no. I mean, there's no real way to a lot of them, a lot of these networks are they run outside of government. They run. And not in an illegal way. They're kind of compliant to every degree, and I think that's going to continue going forward as more and more projects are going to be lauded for following the SEC compliance standards. But at this point, yeah, there's nothing they can do. Number one, and I think number two also, there are some governments that have tried to kind of crack down on it, and those have not really looked great. Like China banning mining. The whole South Korea scare where everyone thought they were going to ban it and they didn't. Russia creating, the ruble, or I forget what they call it, but there's some crypto ruble or something that Putin basically created. But so there's a lot of different ways you can respond. I think the world's looking at you, the market's looking at you, and the people that are in charge of the next wave of fintech, they're going to want to go to the places and they're going to want to innovate in the places that make it easiest to innovate for them. So I think, to answer your question, why would you help these people, is because, if you can't control all money, wouldn't you at least want to be on the same side as people that do?
If you can't beat them, join them.
Right, exactly.
Kind of thing. But I was afraid they might just try to criminalize it. Say, how would you stop it? Say,
right.
It's a criminal offense in the United States to transact business. It's criminal for a vendor to accept Bitcoin instead of U.S. currency. I mean, they're very draconian,
right.
And I think I think it would cause a revolution,
right.
and a backlash.
But, yeah, I think the United States government deserves some credit here. Honestly, I think to not have responded that way is actually quite fascinating, because I think if you look at the way that just how human psychology works, look at the majority of people who have a vested interest in crypto not working, and those people are waving flags out in the streets telling us over and over. And you look at Jamie Dimon, you look at any of these people. I mean, if you are a big owner of a financial platform that is the equivalent of a bank, of course you don't want for people to be debanked. That doesn't make sense.
Well, but now it's interesting because you mentioned Jamie Dimon, who was the CEO
right.
of JP Morgan, and he was totally dissing
right.
crypto, but now he's entering, right? I mean, aren't they creating a coin?
So they're doing a bunch of crypto stuff. I mean, they released like a 100-page PDF report on the markets and crypto a couple weeks later. I mean, they've done a pretty hard 180 on the whole subject. I think. I think that's pretty fair to say. I mean, I think you look at Goldman; they're about to potentially do a security token. I mean, there's a lot of whispering, and once the market becomes more open to institutional money, then we're going to really see JP Morgan and Goldman and all those people. They're not going to come in, for a while. I mean, for them, there's no reason to, right? So they might start to open up trading desks. They might start to do these things, but they're not going to put in a large amount of investment until they know it's safe. There's no reason to for them. They have a corner on the market basically, as far as services go. And so the catchphrase that a lot of bankers have been employing is blockchain, not Bitcoin. Essentially what they're saying is they don't want the technology of blockchain to be connected to Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. But in reality what they're saying is, blockchain doesn't disrupt us. Blockchain helps financial technologies work. Right. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general, they replace the functionality of financial services. So, it's hard. It's kind of an interesting situation because you don't really know who to believe, or who is the arbiter of the truth, right? So, for example, there's this interesting website. I think it's called Bitcoin obituaries or something. Essentially, it catalogs every time a major publication is called Bitcoin dead.
Right.
I think it's has over 200 catalogs of people saying since 2009.
So now you actually started a Potomac Capital, right?
Yeah, Potomac Crypto Capital. Yeah.
Crypto Capital, so tell me what this venture is for you.
So for me, it's kind of a passion project. It's it's for me, like I said, I'm a high school debater, coming from a finance family. So what my mind loves is understanding how things work and understanding things that are important. And so reading about anything that I think is kind of game changing, that's what I love doing. And so for me, I spend the majority of my day reading about everything that's going on in the markets, everything that's going on tech-wise, all the new papers about valuation metrics and that kind of stuff, because that's still being built out for crypto. Like, there's no real good valuation metrics right now. So for me, it's about an ongoing love for researching and understanding it. And also, I think that I can see that this is where the market's going, and I want to be involved in it going forward. And I want to be someone who can say that they were here for this momentous change. I mean, I think if you think about human history and how long it's taken for each revolution of money to occur and each abstraction of money to occur, I mean, it takes a long time for society to change. And if you think about how quick the transfer from cash to debit was, or cash to credit was, I think that might be the type of revolution we're thinking about, where it goes entirely abstract to some people. But the more that you realize that what we have right now is already an abstraction of wealth. I mean, that's what paper fiat is. It's just a representation of governments, backing that. Other than that, it's nothing, right? So I think people now, my generation, understand that more. You're less ingrained to kind of see things as they are, and you kind of begin to question things more. And that's kind of what the root of debate and research is, which is kind of what I love to do. So I love researching just for myself, and the fact that I get to do that with two of my best friends and potentially make a living for myself at the same time is just a great opportunity.
So what will Potomac do exactly? In other words, what function are they going to perform?
So basically, with Potomac Crypto, the vision is basically to do a private fund. Right now, it's just us and family members. The kind of the legal stuff needs to get move forward a little bit more to more clarity before we kind of feel comfortable taking other people's money. And even accredited investors, you don't really want that liability. So what we basically do is a long short mix, meaning that the majority of our portfolio is long picks that we're willing to hold for over a year based on what we think the value of those projects are. So that's blue chip protocols, this kind of stuff that is kind of the meat of the blockchain investment is that. And then we also have, kind of a smaller percentage of our portfolio dedicated to doing things like day trading, swing trading, tracking pump and dumps, all those types of things are very interesting.
So basically a hedge fund
that's
going to analyze this market space and people put money into
right.
it. And this is, and like you said, it sounds like this is right in your wheelhouse as far as what you get up early every morning and love every minute of it.
Right.
Yeah, which is really, really great. And you also have been interning, to get more experience this summer with DNA Fund, right?
Yes.
So, what any ahas, being there, because now you're around people who are on the investment side of this. Because where I'm going, is the getting to the practical side, saying, okay, now I'm somebody out here, viewing this, and there's a certain amount of dollars I have allocated to invest, and I'm kind of interested in this crypto thing. What should I be thinking, or what what should I be considering? So you're kind of in the heat of it, working at DNA right now. What have you discovered there walking in?
The reason I decided to kind of work at DNA is, I don't get a lot of exposure to the ICO, pre-ICO side of things. It's kind of the more venture capitalist side, basically. And one of the reasons is because we just don't have enough money in our fund to be dedicating any large percentage to ICOs, especially because those can take years to vest, which really doesn't make sense in this market for me at least. But I did want to get more exposure with kind of how to analyze those projects and then meeting the team members and that kind of stuff. And part of the problem is that there's a bit of an information asymmetry with people that are in the community, the blockchain community. That's like the most important thing you can do. If you're kind of if you're a technologist, if you're a markets person, super interested in this, you kind of got to go to conferences. You got to go to these things. I mean, and conferences are a huge ripoff, like honestly. But you have to go for the networking side of things, for the community side, because that's
the rip off how the information they provide
just,
is not really
I mean
valuable.
the speakers are good a lot of times, but I mean they bust the same speech out 1,000 times a summer.
Right.
So I think for me some of them are really interesting to see and great if you can meet the people and talk to them, that's an added bonus. But just the atmosphere of being there is really what's important. I mean if you think about it, it's like same as the internet. If you're in Silicon Valley or if you're in wherever the hub is, that's kind of the best place to be because,
right.
Information's flying around. It might be, your 10 friends are doing the next big 3 projects. Like,
right.
I'd say that, it's rare that I come across an ICO I'm analyzing where I don't really know someone involved in the project.
Yeah.
And so that side's been, incredible to kind of be part of. And the ICO side of things is super interesting. Like I said, the idea that of like an entirely new investment vehicle for people to get involved in early seed, basically IPOing. Like I mean, it's a super, super interesting opportunity for people to be able to invest in ICOs. But what I've found,
for people who might not understand what an ICO
right.
is, an initial coin offering.
Right.
So what is that? That's somebody who's creating a new crypto, a new blockchain, and bringing it to the marketplace and trying to get people
right.
interested in
so,
it.
So the ICO is the token equivalent of an IPO. Sometimes called a STO, which is like a security token offering, or a TGE, a token generation event. There's a bunch of different names, and the semantics kind of play into, is it a security, is it a
right.
and I don't want to play. I'm not like playing that game, but
right.
but the general idea is that an ICO is going public for a coin,
right.
Or for a token, and so people are investing in the project, in the use case that's coming out, and those are open to any accredited investor right now, and they kind of going forward will probably become easier to access, I'd say. But I mean the biggest epiphany for me has just been the quality of the projects coming up, and as far as ICOs and things that I'm seeing is far more promising than what I saw even 3 months ago.
So now if I'm out there and I've got some money, I've accumulated, maybe I've even got a bunch of money in some kind of a retirement account, or maybe I've got some money stashed in savings, or I have good cash flow, in a business, that I'm some kind of a professional
right.
or other type of person. And I have everybody whisper in my ear, you got to get into crypto. You got to get into crypto. How would somebody who doesn't know what you know, has maybe watched this now, they have some context.
Right.
What's the best way for them to approach investing in this area?
Well, I'd say first you should do your own research. Is kind of a principal rule in the crypto space. We're all self-taught, so people will respect people that are self-taught.
Right.
There are lots of courses out there. There are lots of seminars and things you can do and conferences, and those are all good ways to get your knowledge up. But I'd say that the vast majority of them kind of stick to a pretty base level of understanding. So to really understand what you're doing, you have to kind of take the bull by the horns and kind of read and research and kind of figure out what's going on for yourself. And I think if you do that, some people are going to come to to different conclusions. And that's not to say that the conclusions that I've made are the only correct ones. But I think if you're looking to get into the space, whether as an investor or kind of a speculative investor, whether you want to get deep into it, and I think the answer is the same for all of them. You want to figure out what the crypto community is like, where you live, and try and kind of start talking to those people. Start just get yourself involved, get in the room. And then spend a good amount of time. There's a large amount of literature now on crypto and blockchain, all this stuff. So I would listen to those types of things. And then there are just tons of educational modules and things like podcasts. You can hear some of the one of the great things about crypto is that the rock stars of crypto are still kind of in the space doing things on a daily basis. Like they're not retired, rich Warren Buffett type. I mean, not that he's retired, but they're not out there on a day-to-day basis,
right.
kind of in the streets doing stuff. So
they've got their sleeves
right.
rolled up and they're in the action.
Like I get to work with like one of my all-time heroes in Scott Walker, which is he's kind of one of the crypto OGs. Is just walking around the office.
What's a crypto OG?
So I'd say I think he got into Bitcoin in like 2009. He kind of did the first ICO. He was involved in the first ICO. So him and Brock Pierce are go way back, and they're kind of the people I look up to in the space. So
Did they help create this space basically?
yeah, so they helped kind of bring it into the mainstream along with a lot of other people, obviously. But
What's funny is that like back in '09, like that was such a long
yeah,
time
exactly.
ago.
That's the thing is the thing people like don't quite understand is it's the Wild Wild West right now.
Yeah.
But the way that technology and markets work today is that we're seeing things that revolutionize the world very quickly, and the reason that can happen is because of things like the internet, phones, all this stuff.
So whose blogs and podcasts do you recommend if somebody wants to do some research?
Crypto, Twitter, and Reddit, all those things are actually good resources. Telegram, groups, things like that.
Are there blogs from like Brock or Scott that?
I don't think either of them really blog, but there are a good amount of sites that do the equivalent of a Bloomberg function. So like Cointelegraph, CoinDesk, CoinMarketCap is the best for kind of price and volume and that kind of stuff, and on-chain finance is also really good for that. But I'd say books, podcasts. I mean, really just anything you can get your hands on. Just kind of go as deep as possible. And also Medium has great technology posts. Like if you're someone who understands technology or can digest that kind of stuff, a lot of the best kind of valuation stuff is on there for valuation-minded people.
And very generically though, so my options are either to put money into a fund like Potomac when you're ready, right? Potomac Crypto, saying, okay, I want you to do all the reading. I don't want to do all the reading. You do all the reading. I think you're smart. Here's some money, and I'm going to put money there. Another way would be for me just to go and buy, Bitcoin or buy Ethereum or buy Dash or buy, whichever one I feel like is the right coin that I want to buy, or maybe buy a few of them. And at that point, I'm a speculator and trader, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to buy at this point and then, have an out.
So the few things I'd say kind of on that idea is, first, people need to remember that crypto markets are highly illiquid, not in the fact that you can't get your money out, because you can obviously, interact with it 24/7. It's great liquidity that way. What I mean is that the price volatility makes it so that, if I need, 90% of my budget to survive on a yearly basis, I shouldn't be gambling 20% of my budget on crypto, because that just, it's the risk reward doesn't quite line up. Like I would never invest money in crypto that I need. Like if it's ancillary and you kind of, can count it as lost money or invested money and kind of leave it alone for a while. That's kind of the right path. I think, unless you really know what you're doing, you shouldn't try day trading. I mean, especially on like BitMEX has like extremely high leverage. I know a lot of people that have lost, a lot of money on BitMEX kind of trading with leverage. So the way to do it would be to, put your money in some sort of, they also have tokenized funds. So like Crypto 20 would be an example of what's basically an index of the top. I mean, it's not quite an ETF or not quite an index, but it's basically an aggregated weighted score of value of the top 50 projects, something like that. And so there's a couple of things you can do like that. But I would say that the main thing is figure out how to do your security and set up a wallet. And don't, click on Reddit links and follow YouTube links and all those things. I would say, figure out how to get the security stuff kind of ironed out before you get anything. And that's always kind of, even as a running a fund, I mean, we literally don't buy coins we don't have a good way to hold. And so, whether or not that coin's really interesting, if it's only possible to hold on a desktop, like not something I'm interested in, because, it's just way too much risk. So I'd say tell people to be, people need to be risk adverse. It's still really early. It's not guaranteed returns. And then at the same time, the stuff you want to invest in is the protocol layer, the blockchain based layer. So like things like Ethereum, Bitcoin, EOS, all of those things, Hashgraph, GoChain. Those are all protocol layer projects. And so, I'd say a good amount of the coins you see and the good amount of the ICOs are ERC20 tokens, which all rely on Ethereum network working. So if you want to be risk adverse, bet on protocol layers as opposed to like dApps. And
so if you're buying Ethereum, let's say, is that betting on the protocol layer, or is there some other aspect of it that you have to buy? Or
so
Bitcoin?
So Ethereum and a lot of these computation networks are what you're essentially buying is access to use their code and their platform to use smart contracts and to build your application on top of the platform. But you're still using the network to send tokens and things like that. And so that can get slow and cumbersome for the Ethereum network. So like if you look at Augur, which is a project that just recently had its mainnet launch, it's a Jeremy Gardner project. It's been really, really big project for a long time. There's a lot of worries that that's going to clog up the Ethereum network. If you look back, CryptoKitties put a lot of strain on the network, and that was a relatively small amount of volume. So we still have to. These things are not fully tested yet. Right. I mean, we want to see where Lightning Network goes. All that stuff is kind of still in play. So it's still very, very early. But again, things progress quickly in the space. So figure out what the news is, read the news, read everything you can. Start talking about it. People in the space love to talk about the space. That's what you realize.
Jordan, to say this was fascinating is an understatement. And obviously you have an extraordinarily high amount of passion and brain horsepower. When those things come together, magic happens. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think people should know about this particular subject?
There are a couple of things. First, the normal conversation I have with people about crypto kind of starts off with people asking what I do or something like that, and it kind of leads to this conversation where people they just want to know why, like what's the pitch, why should I get into crypto, and what I always tell them is that first of all, there's no downside. I mean, whether or not you want to be financially investing is a different question, but to familiarize yourself with the space and the market, the technology, there's no downside to doing that, right? Like if it turns out to be nothing, there's nothing, right? I mean, I'm sure there's a few lessons to be learned, there's a lot of tech that's been kind of evolving along with the space, connectivity, IoT, all of that stuff kind of has had an increase in funding and because of crypto projects doing ICOs. So what I'd say is the reason why crypto, or the reason why you should get involved in it, is a couple of things. Like first, if it does end up happening, we all have to figure out how to interact with the world using these products, and that's gonna be a hard curve initially. And so to have a leg up and be able to already do that and to kind of see where the future is going ahead of time is a unique opportunity. But also, I think if you look at how human history has evolved, whatever gives you the most functionality is what people will use. As long as there is a sleek interface and people can understand. Once something's been invented, if it has a higher functionality, people will eventually gravitate toward it. And I think that's what you're going to see with crypto. I mean, it might spend a couple more years in this kind of gray territory, people saying, is it going to survive? Is it not going to survive? I mean, as of right now, there is no guarantee that the technology is going to work, and I can say with 100% certainty it will survive. And the reason is because there are so many other things people don't see, right? Like the idea that everyone who's graduating, I literally know like hundreds of kids who are coming up my age, that are involved in blockchain projects, people that are doing ICOs. I mean, the incredible amount of brain drain to the space, like I said earlier, makes it incredibly intriguing to me. I mean, I've been doing kind of entrepreneur finance stuff my whole life, and I've never met people that are as smart and dedicated as people that I met in crypto, and just a year basically, maybe a year and a half, like really on the scene. So it's just a really, really incredible experience, and I think it's worth your time to check it out. I mean, just something I was looking at last night. There's a bunch of projects that are basically doing a own your own data type play, where you have a blockchain identity, and essentially what you do is when you are generating data as a consumer, that is being captured and sold by data brokerage people
Facebook, Google,
to advertisers who are then so really you're looped out of that entirely. There are a bunch of projects that will allow you to harvest your own data, send it to who you want to send it to, get monetarily rewarded for that. Things that make the consumer's life way easier. I mean, that's why people are building these projects, is to help consumers and to help the next generation. But what I'd say is that the seeds of all of the next gen stuff. So IoT, augmented reality, VR, all of this stuff, Internet of Things. So all of these trends, they go seamlessly with the blockchain, and they will. In fact, they work better together. And so a bet on the blockchain space is not a bet on Bitcoin or blockchain. It's a bet on the entire direction of where the fintech market is going. And I mean that on a very fundamental level. And so the impact that it's about to have is almost impossible to put it into words. And so you really just have to read it for yourself, is what I would say.
Well, terrific. This has been extraordinarily stimulating, and I appreciate you spending time sharing. I'm curious to see, maybe we'll do an update sometime in the future to see, did you finish school or did you not finish school? Let's see what happens to Jordan. And thank you very much for sharing all this.
Thank
with
you.
us.
I appreciate coming here and getting to talk about this stuff.
Thank you.